Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Ruth Catlow's presentation. She'll be talking about decentralizing power and resources in the art world. Hashtag Art Project is brought to you by the Vancouver Biennale, and a big thanks to Jessica Angel for curating. I'll now hand it off to Ruth to tell us more about this fascinating subject.
Thanks, Brian. And yeah, thanks to Jessica for what an amazing organizational feat this is to have brought so many people together. Jessica. We thank Jessica. There she was. I'm now just going to share my screen because I'm going to show you some slides. Okay. I'm now having trouble sharing. That's annoying. Okay, let's try again. I promise you, we tried this beforehand, and now we're having a... Let's try again once more. Here we go. Fantastic. Can someone at the other end just tell me whether you can see my slides, because I can't see what's going on.
Yep, we can see you, Ruth. Thank you.
Can you see my slides, Brian?
Yes, we can see them. They look
Fantastic.
great.
Okay. So thank you so much for coming along. It's a great honour to be included in the Vancouver Biennale Art Projects 2020. Thanks so much for inviting me. My name's Ruth Catlow. I'm artistic director. I'm an artist and artistic director of Furtherfield, which is London's longest running D-Centre for Arts and Technology. We've been going since the mid-90s. As an artist who grew up in the web in the mid-90s, I've been fascinated with the potential of decentralization technologies that would really allow us to organize in new ways. And also, I must say, I've kind of learned the hard way about the hazards. I guess what drew us into the blockchain space, so the title of my talk is Decentralising Power and Resources in the Art World. And this has been a kind of preoccupation since we took to the web as artists and thought about what it meant to build our own art world online. And what's drawn us into the blockchain space is this fascination with the relationship between art, money, value, and power. These things are not new interconnections, but every time we get a new global technology, the way power flows changes and the relationship between art, money, and value change. Back in 2017, we published a book called Artists Rethinking the Blockchain. And this was before NFTs were a thing. A lot's happened in that time. And one of the things that's happened in that time is the launching of Furtherfield's Decentralised Arts Lab. So this is a Furtherfield initiative that grew out of conversations with artists, techies, researchers, thinkers, and social activists who wanted to understand the potential for blockchain technologies to really increase freedoms, fairness, and solidarity in the art world. So looking beyond the potential for financial speculation and money laundering, which is a thing in the art world. Since 2015, our award, in the mess with the slides, I forgot to set my timer, which is a mistake. Excuse me, will I just put this right? Okay. So since 2015, our award-winning programme has been developed in partnership with a number of UK universities, grassroots and established European arts organisations, Guild, Serpentine Galleries, Goethe Institute, and many more. And together we've been trying to get a kind of critical, practice-based look at what it means to crowdsource R&D by leading artists using blockchain and the Web3 technologies. So I'm going to tell you about 2 DECAL initiatives. So these are artist-led experiments that ultimately aim to distribute power and resources in the art world. Now, we might ask ourselves, why is this a job for artists? Like, what do artists really care about the systems upon which the art world run? And even less, why do artists care about technology? Well, right now I'm going to speak for what artists bring to these questions. So I think artists bring a really unique aesthetic sense to governance questions. So questions about who owns things and how decisions get made. And by aesthetic, I mean that they address questions. So artists are able to address these kind of different aspects of the art world. They make these questions more accessible. They can feel into different areas of appeal, and they can feel their way through the kind of questions of the kind of ethical questions and the social and ethical experience. So the 2 projects I'm going to talk about are platforms that we're developing by, with, and for cultural communities. And these are Culture Stake. This is a web-based voting system that allows everyone to vote on the types of cultural activity they would like to see in their locality. And the Blockchain Art History Timeline, the world's first timeline of blockchain art and crypto art using DAOs, so decentralized autonomous organizations, as the decentralized curation tools to do so. So the arts have got a problem. I've kind of alluded to this, but there's this awkward relationship between the value of arts to society and how it's resourced. And this kind of happens across both money and funding. So funding is either self-funded, if artists come from a privileged background or a privileged set of circumstances, public funding, corporate or private funding. And then value, well, it's value to the self, the creator or their communities, social value, economic, or just the innate core value that art brings to life. And these things sit in really awkward relationship to each other. And these then have a series of knock-on effects. So we have currently a growing inability of artists' economies to support living artists to thrive. So in the world's richest cities with thriving arts economies, we see artists barely able to support themselves. Connected to this, we see a centralisation, a kind of sameness, and a lack of diversity in the arts, both in terms of its production and the people who are looking at it. And finally, a kind of long-standing and growing problem with the arts as a vehicle for speculation and money laundering. So what does decentralising the arts with the blockchain bring to this situation? Well, there's an exciting boom, as people have been talking about, in the rare art and decentralised art market platforms, and the communities involved there are very lively in the creation and promotion and sale of digital images. And there's a really wonderful energy in these spaces and a lot of attention to the new technical innovations. But for us, the kind of freedom in the arts has to also build the value of art to societies, not just the artistic brand or the price paid for the product. So we're kind of looking possibly in a slightly different direction about what success means for us, like when something interesting is happening artistically. So what the blockchain does in this realm is enabling us to think about creating new models for distributing resources and kind of renegotiating the value and meaning of art. So for instance, DAOs or decentralized autonomous organizations on the blockchain have this potential to kind of remodel and diversify collaboration, to lower the cost for organizing, and also to support experiments with incentives and a possible potential to bake in relationships of solidarity for artists with new kinds of audiences, patrons and participants. And by redefining authorship and ownership with incentives for fractional progressive ownership and collective production art livelihoods, these are all kind of areas of experimentation that are really kind of alive at the moment. And I think most of all, DECAL, Decentralised Arts Lab, we're very keen to bring people across different fields to create new kinds of imaginaries for how we act in the world and to bring new different kinds of people into the space. So I'm going to talk, how long have I got? Okay, we're doing all right. I'm going to talk about Culture Stake. So Culture Stake is the first project I'm going to talk about. So this is an experiment to really widen the conversation about what art can be and how it lives in the world. What's at stake here is this is the unblocking of the collective imagination at a time when we most need it. So it's this idea that while art really sits in the kind of pockets of a very few people, it's not exerting or offering the power to many people that it could do. So what is Culture Stake? Well, it's a web-based voting system that allows anyone to vote on the types of cultural activity that they would like to see in their locality. It uses a combination of quadratic voting on the blockchain, and by doing this, it kind of puts cutting-edge Web3 technologies to radical new emancipatory use in the cultural sector. We'll talk about locality in a minute, but first let's just talk about the tech and why we think this particular use of tech is, what value it's bringing to this as a kind of mission. So unlike one person, one vote, QV or quadratic voting allocates a number of voting tokens for participants to distribute across their choices as they see fit. So as casting multiple votes for the same choice raises the token kind of price of the vote, participants must carefully weigh up their options. So it lends this feeling of jeopardy to the vote. You have to, it isn't just like you can express intensity of a vote, but if you want to express greater intensity, then it's going to cost you a lot more votes. And as a result, this has been shown to result in much more nuanced decision making for people casting votes. It also, by creating an interface that has a kind of expressive feedback, it results in, it kind of allows people to feel the consequences of their choice better and to foster a strong sense of agency among participants, so they can really kind of see and feel the effect of the choices that they're making. And why the blockchain? Well, it feels important to us, especially I think the recent US election kind of shines a light on this, that by putting records on the blockchain, it means that it can't be rigged, and also it can be checked by a growing group of people who my colleague and friend artist Lara Blaschick calls the armchair auditors. In a decentralized world, there comes more responsibility upon us to really pay attention to whether the things that are proposed by our data can be checked and proved. So why to us is locality important? Well, this is about both locality and also about more people feeling that it's their business to have a say about the culture that takes place in their locality and to expect the best for themselves. So currently, people in places actually have very little say on the decisions about the arts that are funded in their places. So major artists, cultural sponsors have the upper hand, and this can really result in a winner-takes-all and one-size-fits-all blockbuster programming. So we get big names going from one place to another, but not necessarily making that there isn't necessarily a meaningful connection with the places that they visit. And it, as I've said, this creates data commons for cultural communities. So when votes are in, people can go and have a look at what the votes were and understand more about what is meaningful to people in the places where they live. So the way we're about to do our first test run this spring, and any cultural organisation can set up the vote using an app and consult closely with their communities about which artists to feature in their next exhibition, for example. Or another example might be a city council might need to find out which new artwork should occupy a recently vacated plinth. That's culture stake. How are we doing for time? Okay, we're doing all right. So the second project I want to talk to you about, so this was, if culture stake kind of widens the conversation about how art is valued by different communities, the second project I want to talk to you about, a blockchain art history timeline, asks who shapes narratives about art and value. So the blockchain art history timeline, is the world's first timeline of blockchain art and crypto art, created using DAOs as the decentralized curation tools to do so. We've just produced a feasibility study, and in that feasibility study is a kind of indicative timeline of artworks for a blockchain art timeline. So we've worked with art historians, blockchain art researchers, designers, and engineers to kind of make this feasibility study. The indicative timeline has 30 plus examples of artworks and some horrible emissions. I mean, it's kind of interesting that, like, even in this early stage, to even start to think about how to make a representative timeline becomes like an agony. But the reason for doing this was that we wanted to kind of show some of the difficulties, and also to establish the categories and the kinds of metadata that might be attached to them. And we've made a rough as a way for people to look at it and say, hell no, that isn't what it should look like. It should do this instead. And we're really open to feedback at the moment. I'm showing this Julian Oliver's Harvest because with the NFT craze, it's easy to forget that there is this whole other kind of aspect of blockchain artworks that have been going on that live in the physical world, that are sometimes critical of the blockchain itself and some of the hype and rhetoric surrounding it. And this work is a wind-powered turbine that generates, that mines Zcash to fund climate change research. So it's kind of like making all these conceptual loops around some of the controversies around transparency and energy use in relation to blockchain culture. So this is an ambitious project. It's also a playful project and intended as a provocation to bring 3 different communities together. So the community of artists and art historians, especially interesting to us, are those artists who come from a conceptual background or who are interested in art as social critique. But also art business. So all the work that's going on around fractionalization, tokenization, provenance, insurance, all of these kinds of things. And of course, the community of blockchain developers, especially those interested in governance issues. Why a timeline? Okay, so I think the reason we got so excited about this project is that we think that timelines have a quality or have a character, there's characteristics to a timeline project, which I think speak to each of these 3 different communities. So timelines of art have traditionally been created from the center by art world authorities, who then go on to exert, I think, an undue influence over what happens to future markets and really how art is valued and talked about through history. We also want to put the hype around blockchain's gift to governance and democratization to the test. And we also want to draw attention to blockchain art and crypto art forms that would otherwise disappear from history, as happened with some of the early art that was made for the internet. We think that the art that is happening in this space with this medium, like, has really a lot to tell us about the world now, about blockchain's impact on the world now, and about a whole set of things about our society. And so we feel like it's important that this stuff lands and is able to be looked at over time. I'm going to finish up just by talking about the technical approach, because I imagine some people would be interested in this. Our timeline creation process demonstrates 3 main use cases of DAOs. So asset management, collaboration on a task, and crowd curation. We're still building the partnerships for this, but we would like, we're planning, this may be mad, we're planning to move between DAO platforms as a way of kind of testing different flavors and use cases and getting a sense of usability and seeing what it feels like to build a community that crosses platforms. So we're currently conceiving of this as a nomadic project. And this is really where we need your help, which is to discover the best ways to engage people and create access to these DAO platforms for the things that they're good at. So for instance, we might use Moloch DAO for fundraising, Colony or Aragon DAOs for sorting and evaluating entries, and possibly the DAO Stack platform for collective curation. Yes, and again, I must just flag the plantoids here, really early an example of a really important early blockchain artwork by the Okeos Art Collective, which again is kind of like, as it says here, it's harnessing the forces of automated governance and connecting it to questions of aesthetics. If you don't know this work, go and have a look at it. It's an absolutely kind of crucial artwork in blockchain art history, I think. So to finish up, to be called revolutionary, as decentralized tech often is, the real revolution must be the decentralization of power and resources. So what we think of as revolutionary tech in the arts must distribute power and autonomy to more diverse people and beings, like different kinds, like it needs to nurture systems of healthy interdependence for humans and more than human systems. We have to move away from small groups of experts making decisions for large groups of people towards large groups of people working together as cultural communities. So, who gets to determine the art that gets seen and the histories that get written? How can more people shape art's narratives and value in society? And can blockchain technologies really deliver on their promise to revolutionize collective decision-making? You decide, and then contact us, and we'll work it out together. This is how you contact me. Here are my details. And now I'm going to stop sharing. Apparently we're still live.